Hello, genealogists. This is Craig, and this is Just Genealogy. And today we're going to talk about crafting your genealogy education plan so that you can accomplish research success. This is one of the most important things that I do at the beginning of each year, and that's to create some sort of genealogy research plan for the year in regards to my personal education. When you're a know-it-all like me, it's important to be constantly learning, and genealogists usually are constant learners. So you want to make an educational plan with all of your personal goals in mind. Now, it's much easier now to do an education plan because there are so many webinars that are available and so many of them are free. But webinars aren't the only way to get to an education in genealogy. And that's pretty much what I want to talk about today is all the ways that you can accomplish some sort of education, genealogically speaking. So, what's an educational plan? Well, in the beginning, I think it should be a written document that identifies your genealogical weaknesses and what you're going to do to fix it. Over time, it might not have to be written, but I advise it. You also need to document your education, especially if you want to be certified or accredited. I have a document that I use constantly, which I call my Board for Certification Statement of Activities. And that's something that I have to provide every 5 years as I renew. That's something that you'll have to provide when you go to get certified. Also, the Association of Professional Genealogists, should you belong to that organization, and I advise that you do, has a continuing education form that is due every 31st of January, where you describe education during the course of the previous year. So let's talk about how you are going to accomplish genealogical improvement through what I'll call self-directed study, because after all, no one is in charge of making you a better genealogist but you. And this is really going to fall totally on you and how much motivation you have to become educated genealogically speaking is going to be up to you. Recognize that there are both free and paid educational resources available. And let me go through some of them. There are, in my mind, 5, possibly 6 main types of genealogical education available, and who offers them is what we're going to go through. And I also have at heritagebooks.com a list of resources that you might find. I also have a list of resources at heritagebooks.com that you might find useful as books that you might want to become very familiar with as part of your study. And I'll be modifying that over the next few days and weeks to make it even more vibrant for you, more useful. So the first thing I want to talk about is webinars. And especially after the pandemic, webinars have been pretty much, especially with Zoom and GoToMeeting, the way to go, since it wasn't possible for us all to get together. Now, there are probably more than 4, but I look at there being 4 different kinds of webinars that are important to me. The first are the society webinars, and I pay attention to North Carolina State Society, Tennessee State Society, Florida State Society, the Utah Genealogical Association, and the Southern California webinars. I listen to many of them. Sometimes you have to be a member of the society in order to listen to these webinars. Sometimes when they are first given, they're free and you don't get a handout unless you're a member of the society, those kind of things. So it varies by society, but these in my mind are the ones that I pay attention to and listen to often. Now, that doesn't mean these are the only ones available. There are others. Find out what your own local, state societies are doing in regards to what genealogical education you can find. Now, there also are webinars provided by the Association of Professional Genealogists, which you should pay attention to, and it's a benefit of belonging to APG. There are also out there the Legacy Family Tree webinars. I have 22 webinars out there myself. In the description, there's a link that will allow you to get to them. If you'd like to see my 22, you just have to put my name in as speaker. Scott will do. But also at Legacy Family Tree, and probably for me, the most important part and the part that I pay the most attention to are the free board for certification webinars. I try to watch at least one of those every month, try to even do two where possible. I've had some times where I've sat down and binged on board for certification webinars. I especially like those that are done by Elizabeth Schoen Mills, but who wouldn't? Now, the other opportunity, although it's not a webinar, is things like this YouTube channel. There are plenty of YouTube channels out there that talk about genealogy, and you can tell which ones are the good ones that you want to pay attention to. Now, the second type of genealogical education out there is conferences. Now, there are society conferences, local and state, and these are generally 1 or 2 day events. And you should, of course, participate in your state society, your local society, those kind of things. But there are also regional conferences, and these are multi-day conferences. They last sometimes 3, 4 days. The four that I pay the most attention to are Ohio. I've got 4 lectures to give there this year. That's the Ohio State Society. And then I also like to participate in the New England Regional Conference, NERC. I've taught there many times. The Southern California Jamboree, I've taught there many times. And the Texas State Genealogical Society, I had 3 lectures there last year. So these 4 regional conferences are probably, in my mind, again, they're not the only regional conferences, but these are the 4 that I pay attention to. There also is the national conference, the National Society Genealogy Conference, and I try to make sure that I'm always speaking there. It's going to be virtual this year, unfortunately. That's unfortunately in my mind. I can't wait for it to become a non-virtual event again, like it was last year, because that's a marvelous opportunity to do one of the important things that you can do from the perspective of education, and that's networking, learning about other people that are out there and what they know compared to what you know, and picking up things that you don't know to add them to the things that you now know. So the third method of genealogical education that's available is institutes. Now, these are usually a week of classes. Generally, there are multiple tracks. The Salt Lake Institute of Genealogy, affectionately referred to as SLIG, provides multiple opportunities and multiple tracks. I advise at some point you at least take the advanced methodology courses. Of course, I'm going to advise that if you've got brick walls you can't deal with, that you take the guidance and consultation track that I run. I'll be leaving for Salt Lake City in a couple of weeks to do that. I'm the only live guy in a virtual event this year. The Salt Lake Institute also has other opportunities throughout the year you may find very useful to you. Again, you especially want to eventually take some of the advanced courses. Now, the Institute of Genealogical and Historical Research, affectionately called IGHR, I taught in the advanced methodology course there for a year. I shouldn't say for a year, for a decade. And I also I was a coordinator for the military courses there. And now Michael Strauss is doing that. So if you're into military, I advise those advanced courses there at IGHR. And I also advise the advanced methodology course. The last time I taught at IGHR was in Vic Dunn's Virginia course. If you're into Virginia, there are 2 courses that alternate years dealing with Virginia that I highly recommend. There also is the Genealogical Research Institute of Pittsburgh, called GRIP. I coordinated one course there on military a while back. It's now been taken over by the National Genealogical Society. And if you're an East Coast person, or anywhere for that matter, it's not hard to get to. I recommend it for a week. Now, a week of classes, but not a multiple track, is the Genealogical Institute on Federal Records, called GenFed. And that's where you can do the deep dive on records in the National Archives. And I highly recommend that also. I taught at it almost 30 years ago, maybe 40, when it had a different name. The fourth educational opportunity is online courses. The National Genealogical Society has many courses that will help you in your genealogical journey. I have 3 courses out there on military records. There is a new course out there on artificial intelligence that I'm very interested in. There also is the National Institute of Genealogy. This is a Canadian organization, and it also will be very helpful to you in some specific areas that you might have interest in, especially if you're a Canadian, but not only Canadians should take a look at it. The fifth, and one of the most important to me for individuals whose resources are limited, is self-directed study in creating a reading program for improving your knowledge base. And there are probably 8 books that I think you should have mastery of as part of your long-term educational plan. And I think the first is Mastering Genealogical Proof by Thomas Jones. I started a program myself several years back when it first came out of trying to read a chapter every week. And having finished Mastering Genealogical Proof, I moved on to reading Mastering Genealogical Documentation. I will admit that Mastering Genealogical Documentation, I had to read some chapters more than once. But education and repetition go hand in hand. I'd also advise that you read Genetic Genealogy in Practice to get you started in genetic genealogy if you don't have a background there. I'd also recommend that you read the NGS Research in the States pamphlet for the states of your interest, just to see if you're missing something. Now, there are a couple of books which I have been involved in, and I don't use them very often once I read them, but I read them chapter by chapter. And again, a chapter a week kind of thing. And the first one was Professional Genealogy for Researchers, Writers, Editors, Lecturers, and Librarians. It came out many years ago. And the second is the one that followed on, the Professional Genealogy Preparation, Practice, and Standards. I had the pleasure of writing chapter 24 on publishing for that book. So those books are, again, books that you should read chapter by chapter. There's sometimes where I go back, like if I have to do a book review or something like that, I might go back and reread the chapter on how to do a book review, that kind of thing. So I find that they're very useful, and all of these books are within my 3-foot range normally if I was in my office, which, as you can see, I don't happen to be in my office currently. There are a couple of other books which I think you will find very helpful. One is Genealogy Standards, Second Revised Edition, which we, of course, have a YouTube channel videos that deal with those individual standards as time goes by, doing those once or twice a month. And then the other is The Researcher's Guide to American Genealogy by Val Greenwood. Again, this is a book that you should read chapter by chapter. It's sort of like the Bible of genealogy, and it's been revised several times. Now, there are other resources that may help you with your learning goals. I always recommend the Professional Management Conference of the Association of Professional Genealogists. I try to speak at it every other year. Some of the things that you'll find on my YouTube channel are a result of what I've spoken at the PMC conference. If you want to become a professional genealogist, one of the most important things that you can do is network, and this is an excellent place to network, and the courses that are made available are very pertinent to what professionals are interested in. The most recent one was in Salt Lake City in October. There are also a couple of special interest groups that I'm involved with, and I believe are very important to my personal education. One is the APG Writers SIG, that's the Association of Professional Genealogists Writers Special Interest Group, and I'm going to be vice president of that this year. So we're bringing together a schedule of things. If you are a member of APG, and I recommend that you do that, you should definitely belong to the Writers SIG. It's very inexpensive to join. I think it's $20 a year. And then the APG Forensic SIG, if you're into forensics, which is a sort of a new field in genealogy that deals with more modern things, genealogically speaking, and the law and court cases and those kind of things. That special interest group is very important to the forensic people. So sort of in closing, one question that you probably are going to ask, well, how many hours of education should I aim for a year? Well, personally, my goal is 120. And that's about 2 hours a week. Remember that the Association of Professional Genealogists wants you to have 12. So I figure 10 times that is just a pretty good opportunity for me. Now, do I always get to 120? Well, I sort of cheat because I count the hours that I give lecturing as well as the hours that I give listening to lectures. So I always get to 120 hours. It just depends on how you count things. Remember that you have to educate yourself in order to prepare to give a lecture. And so I always try to make sure that I'm working on something that I don't know anything about. So what kind of skills should you be working on? Well, that's pretty much up to you. I like to work on things that I feel I'm weak on, or do things to make sure that I'm not weak on things. And that's part of my desire to be a constant know it all, but that's just my own personal problem. I have a lecture proposal method where I normally will propose a lecture that I've never given before. And that will force me, as part of my education plan, to, in fact, learn about something well enough that I can stand in front of people and answer questions about the subject without any real fear of embarrassing myself. So I think it's really important that you make educational goals for yourself. And the best way to do that is to create an educational plan. You are the individual who's in charge of your education. No one else is responsible. And I will do the best I can in the description to provide you information on the books that I've talked about today. There are some watch next kind of things in the description that will be helpful to you. And I hope, against hope, that you will create a education plan that will identify your personal learning goals. And then you'll take the opportunity during the course of the year to actually implement that plan. And then at the end of the year, take a look at that plan and see what you did or did not do to live up to your expectations for yourself. And then create another plan. Of course, it's also possible for you to have a long range plan in addition to an annual plan. And so you need to take a look at that also, because that will allow you to chart your genealogical career. So this has been Craig. This has been Just Genealogy, and I will see you again soon. If you felt that this was useful to you, please subscribe. Please tell your friends. We're always trying to add to our knowledge base, and I appreciate any comments that you might provide to me on what I've talked about today or what I might have missed. Thank you so much.